most of the time during that filibuster, before Davis did her thing, it was like C-SPAN 3 at 4 a.m. There was no one watching. It was a snooze fest. But it was the kind of thing we did as a service. So when that who knows if it'll ever be another filibuster, if it's lightning in a bottle, but we want to be there for it, or at least have control of it. So now it's become this thing, this beast that constantly wants to eat. It's like this baby that keeps growing. So now we went from live streaming 1 or 2 things a year to now we live stream about 100 things a year. So this morning we live streamed, for example, former Governor Perry's press conference about his indictment. Yesterday we live streamed a thing with Dan Patrick, new Lieutenant Governor. Something comes to news. I bring up live streaming not to dwell on it so much, but as an example of, I think it speaks well that the Tribune could see something like that Davis thing kind of took off, and it was a nice spark for 24 hours. Tiger by the tail. But then we were small and nimble enough and willing enough from Evan on down to think, all right, shit, this was pretty interesting. How do we be ready for the next one? We want to do that. So we did a Kickstarter campaign. Turn that around fairly quickly to raise some money so we need to buy equipment for it. So now we get these real nimble mobile units that we can send out. These are about $500 units that people can go out and live stream stuff. Like the Rick Perry thing this morning was just an $800 camera with a $500 app. So then we were live streaming it, and people were embedding it, and it looks really nice and professional, but it's pretty low cost. And that's kind of a thing of the Tribune. We have a nice sheen, a nice veneer, but we're really good at stretching dollars. I think is a kind of startup mentality, startup ethos. We're rambling background.
Yeah. So one other thing that I was really curious about is you briefly talked about your background, and if I remember it right, you have an undergraduate degree in sociology from Rice University, and then you have a MFA from UT. And so from the degrees you have, it doesn't sound like you will be well, maybe lose my but if we just look at the degrees you have, it makes me wonder how did you become the chief innovation officer of a tech company? And could you briefly talk about that? And also, what is your responsibility as a CIO at the
This is a good question. So, a big regret I have is that I don't have a technology undergrad or background. And part of it is, I think, I graduated in 1992, and not to disparage the ethos or the thinking back then, but I mean, it was really, in my point of view, it was a different time in the way technology was used in that. Now, technology, and part of it is I'm on the inside, so I drank the Kool-Aid. But I mean, I think technology and creativity are synonymous in so many ways. And I think back then, and part of it was I was being probably stupid and young, more stupid. But they were seen a lot differently. So I was interested in creative endeavors like sociology. Rice didn't have communications major. So what I did was take sociology and then augment that with internships. I worked at the campus radio station heavily, probably lowered my GPA a few points because I spent so much time there. But we kind of did that to make my own kind of journalism program for myself back then. Before I had to do it over, and I have a 13-year-old daughter, so what I'm hoping she does is kind of embrace the creative side, but also embrace the technology side. I think increasingly they're not mutually exclusive. They probably never are. I was just, like I said, a little myopic in my viewpoint of that. But the comp sci majors I knew as an undergrad, we're not going off and starting companies. They're not building a lot of consumer-facing products like SOCOM now. We weren't. I'm sure there were some Zuckerbergs in making and stuff. Maybe I didn't see them. But they were, more going off to large companies and engineering companies and things like that. Whereas the people in the liberal arts were going off more to the stuff I was interested in, which is media and production. So I took, if you're interested in my trajectory, from a sociology background, I took a job at WTTW, a TV station in Chicago, as a production assistant there. So I kind of leveraged that undergrad experience in radio, sociology, got some experience in TV, did an internship at Time Inc. magazines, the umbrella group of Time magazines, and enjoyed all that stuff, but also at the same time I was getting became more interested in broadcast television. So UT had a program, still has it, for screenwriting that James Fisher funded, the Texas Center for Writers. So applied for that after being out in the workforce for a couple of years. I got the MFA there. So it may seem, I guess, on paper a little bit of a disparity in sociology and MFA, but it was a fairly linear track. Then went to Los Angeles for a few years and wrote for, then started writing for television. I started as an agent's assistant, so I was trying to work with broadcast television, the creative side of television. Working as an agent's assistant for a year is an eye-opening experience. If you're interested in Hollywood, I recommend it. You do it once and you move on. There's a great movie called Swimming with Sharks with Kevin Spacey that's all true. Not all, but it's very serious. I did that and started moving into writing for television. So I wrote for a lot of shows no one ever heard of. A lot of cartoons, Beast Wars, and Rusty the Boy Robot, the reboot of Godzilla, and a Western that Henry Winkler did. So I got to work for Henry Winkler for a year. And he's very lucky. That's my one memory of Henry Winkler. He's the guy who likes the Fonz. And that led into writing for games, which led to starting. So that's a long-winded answer.
Also briefly about one where team does.
Right.
You have an innovation team, right? Or
yeah, we're all
not really. You're on your own.
Yeah, the title was something Evan and I made up when I joined. And some of it is, it sounds like I have pixie dust and I fly around. But part of it was, and we were cognizant of that, because there was some resistance at first. We were, E&I and others contributing to formulate the title. On one hand, titles were meaningless, but on the other hand, they do use some meaning things. And so some people were resistant because they thought, oh, that means that guy innovates and no one else innovates. When actually it's the opposite. All of us contribute, almost across the board, have innovation in our DNA and are at least encouraged to innovate. April, who does our sales, is crazy innovative. And she can make money off sponsoring to get someone to sponsor that chair. But if we thought about it, ultimately, the title is, just like you have a chief financial officer, that doesn't mean everyone else doesn't have to worry about money in the company, right? Everyone is worried about money. They want to make more than they spend. Just the chief financial officer is ultimately the one who oversees that and is really kind of leading the charge of keeping financially responsible in doing that. Chief revenue officer, similar thing. Chief executive officer, we all have executive responsibilities. We're not CEO. So that's kind of the title. It's one thing. So the way it works at the Tribune, we have 4 called platform programmers. These are programmers who maintain the website, CMS, the tools. They do kind of the stuff that keeps the site up and running and lets the journalists tell their stories. I directly oversee that group. We have a news app team, which is similar but different. The platform team, I should say, is mostly CS people. They have an engineering or CS background. Although our tech director is a glaring exception. She has a PhD in classics. She was a professor at Vanderbilt and did not like being a professor, so started teaching herself programming. And came and joined us as a programmer now and work with. Typically, they're CS people. And the news app people are a hybrid of they're more journalists who learn coding and things on the side. So that a lot of the innovation stems from that group, but really like Emily, our editor, Ross, and other that have brought down. It is pretty amazing that people contribute. It's a very open, inviting culture in that. They can come forward and say, hey, what if we did this? I have this idea. And it's a very flat organization. There's not a lot of bureaucracy. There's not a lot of, we'll schedule time next month and you have 3 seconds to pitch it. It's not that kind of thing. So do a kind of rally and things like that. Flat, that's the short version.
Right. I think you kind of covered my next question as well, but I'm still going to ask just if there's anything you haven't talked about yet in that perspective. You talk about how people come up with different ideas, and that's actually my question, because one of the reasons that we create this entrepreneurship class is we want our students to create something, be able to create something. And if you want to create something, you need to have ideas. You need to be innovative because you don't want to be creating something that a lot of people have created already, right? So, how does your team come up with all these kinds of ideas or products or know what's the next innovation?
For us, and I think a lot of media companies, the kernel is always what's the need, the content. It's not I have a whole product idea. I have some kind of content I'm trying to share. I'm trying to tell a story, and I'm not sure how to do it. This is not our example. One of our board members is the product director or VP of product at Box Media. So Box does all kinds of things. It's obviously Box, Polygon, and Bird, and Eatery, but Box, which launched Box.com a few months ago, 8 or 10 months ago, they have this amazing feature. It's very simple, but called card stacks. So what they are is they'll take a complex story, Israeli-Palestine conflict, or some big unruly thing. They'll break it down into little cards. And each card, flip through digital cards, tells a little aspect. So it might have like a map of the area on one card. The next one might say, oh, here's the history of it. The next one might have an audio clip. The next one might have, here's what Jimmy Carter tried to do to fix Israel, whatever it is. So each one is really bite-sized, it's a morsel, it's really shareable. So you can say, oh, I had no idea. Put that on Twitter or something. The reason I bring that up is, it's a great thing. It's part of this explanatory journalism. Talking to Trey about it, asked him how it started, and I love his answers. It wasn't that anyone said, hey, I want to do a card, and it's created for a product called cards, and we're going to share cards, and put all kinds of cards in it. It was the opposite. So journalists came to the product people and said, hey, we have these like big unruly stories about Obamacare, or war, or terrorism, or complicated issues. We're trying to find a way to break it down so that people can take a bite, or they can take a full meal. And we're not sure. Short paragraph, a photo gallery, some of these pictures, some of the audio video. And so they started iterating on it, and it came up with just this idea of card stacks. And a card stack might have 2 cards, it might have 50 cards. So it's very flexible, it works that way. It's similar to cooking, that we try to, not so much, we tried this and it hasn't always worked, say, oh, here's a cool shiny object. Hey, newsroom, go use the shiny object. Which often, we tried that, either they said, I don't understand the shiny object, I like the old dull, unshiny object, or it's just maybe it's like, well, it's nice, but the old object was just fine. So we recently tried to make it be driven by, one, what the story is we're trying to tell. And the story isn't always a journalism story. It might be, we're trying to raise money for people to go to this event, or we're trying to promote a new healthcare newsletter we have. Stories that we're getting deep into health. So we try to let that drive, but we're also trying to let it drive by, this is very new for us, but the users themselves, the end users. The Tribune has been lucky in that a lot of the gut decisions that drove the company early on were good decisions. Evan Smith and others who were there at the beginning, just pretty much said, like, I think we should go that way. And people went that way, and it was the right way. But now we got to the point 5 years later, got more mature, had a little more time to assess and figure things out and go, well, we think it's this way, but maybe we should actually ask people to consume it if they think it's that way. So we've started doing a lot of user testing, where we bring people in and ask them to tell us about the product, how it works, how it looks. We do online testing a lot now, where we get strangers through a system, where we can videotape their screen and a microphone. So they'll be asked, like, hey, how do you navigate this site? Or if you're going to share this page with someone, how would you share it? We can actually see them sitting there and they get frustrated a lot, like, I have no idea, this makes no sense. Or, oh, that button must do something. So we're starting to pull that into the process too, which we talked about today. But a lot of the, back to the innovation notion, a lot of stuff that's done the best for us in that it's really kind of been this nice synthesis of the different groups coming together. So we did a project just a couple months ago called the Shell Life. It was a multi-part series about the shell boom with fracking and all the stuff that's going on just south of it. And took the shape of this really beautiful site that has about 20, 25 independent stories that are all heavy in media. So they might be all video, they might be audio, they might be maps. But it was really an ongoing partnership between the programmers, the designers, and the journalists. Just going back and forth. And, like the journalists would be out in the field, and they come back. One guy came back, like, I found this amazing crop dusting. Like I was going to interview this other guy, and I saw a crop dusting play over there. That's cool. And I went, followed it, talked to the guy. It turns out he's been crop dusting in that area for 20 years. And he had all these amazing stories about how it changed because now there's more people, there's activity. He's actually almost dusted people, which is very bad because this used to be a very empty area. And then the journalist actually was smart enough to like, hey, can we put some GoPro cameras on your crop dusting plane? So he ended up coming back with all this amazing footage, looking at the belly of the plane as the plane flies. So I came back and it became one of the central pieces just because it was a great story, but it was pretty much an iterative process. It wasn't anyone said, hey, we're going to have a big video piece and go find a big video piece. And become involved in the story.
So it sounds like a lot of the innovation actually comes from wanting to do something or from wanting to solve a problem,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Really cool.
Can I solve that problem is a big, I think that's a big part of my job and others is not so much saying like, here's what we're going to do and I figured it all out last night when I was in the shower. But it's people coming with a problem and saying, hey, we're trying to tell this kind of story. Or we've got all this video, but we want to annotate the video, I don't know how. Or just, they have kind of like elements, but there's a problem. And so it kind of falls on me, and Jacob, and some other people to go, oh, yeah, I don't know. So let's figure it out. And so kind of leading a process to internally, get people together and figure out okay, what kind of story we're telling, what tech do we have. Looking at our partners around the world, like, oh, Washington Post has this kind of cool thing. Maybe we can borrow that. Sunlight Foundation we work with, they have a thing. They borrow and steal. A lot of the best ideas steal.
Sure. Because we have a web design publishing class for one of our students, and I almost teach that. I think I do teach that class every semester. And students start learning basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and start creating websites. And what I always tell my students is, don't think about what you know already and then create things you want to create, but think about what you want to create first and what you want on your website first. Then think about content. Is that the right question?
Yeah.
Awesome. So why don't we open up? Why don't we open up for questions? Introduce yourself a little bit before you ask a question.
What's that?
Introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, my name is John Whitley. I'm a lecturer here at the State. You're just talking about innovation, and so with your gaming background, you kind of, I've been thinking about ways to tell stories and use gamification or
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, and we haven't done a ton. We've done some like choose your own adventure stuff, some light quizzes. We're trying to build a more robust quiz this spring. And we certainly talk about it. I mean, a challenge we have at Tribune is just like anyone, but it's resources. And so building games, Ev and I butt heads on this a bit. Building a game is often a very labor-intensive endeavor. And the challenge I have in my job is being kind of a tech group and a journalism organization. Journalism moves at this ferocious speed, I should say. And it doesn't really stop or reflect, just kind of finishes one, moves on to the next, finishes one, moves on. We do occasionally do investigative pieces, long pieces, but the clips are really fast. The game industry is fast too, but the game industry too is usually focused a bit more on longer projects, months, maybe years, whereas like a multi-day project is usually a big project. So there is some kind of friction there to overcome because it's hard to say, hey, Chris is this amazing programmer. We're going to sequester him over here for 2 months so he can really build this thing out. It's going to be great. And we're going to use it a lot. But no one talked to Chris for 2 months because, Notion, people say, oh, sure. And then the next day somebody comes up like, oh, crap, I need Chris. Chris wants me. That's something we like. But that's, any group's going to have a 500 person organization, so we didn't have that for a 50 person. We just talk about a lot, you know, and part of it with gamification, we've looked at things. It's a tough one though, because figure out what can we do, what's novelty, what's really going to work. The Tribune did crank this came out before their customer, and news quizzes for that. We think that's something that's really organic and fits with our thing. But even then, there's a resource balancing because crank this daily news quiz was nice. Part of it was that it was each day had fresh questions. So if you played it today, there would be questions about Rick Perry's indictment yesterday and the Super Bowl coming up next week or something like that, this weekend, stuff like that. But that's cool that it's fresh questions, but someone has to feed it fresh questions every day. So that becomes an whole thing too, where in addition to your older job, you got to write 10 cool questions. So it's a challenge that we have. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about gamification, but it seems like it hasn't. In the newsroom, at least, it's tough to find that right balance. What can we sustain and feed versus, it's hard to, you can't really get set it, forget it, really has to be ongoing things.
Yes.
Big way to practice. Given that most universities teach traditional journalism, what courses outside of mass communication / journalism realm would you recommend for journalists in order to get up to speed?
Some kind of basic, at least basic intro to programming. You know, that's HTML and CSS. If you have HTML and CSS, you jump ahead quite a bit. If you got into more serious programming, that's great. I think you get superpowers. But even reporters we have who don't code at all, in fact, some of them have taken online courses or picked up some stuff here and there. It just makes them much more valuable to the organization because they're not coding, but they're conversing. You know, they do it. And some of them actually do. They go off and like, hey, I kind of made a little mock-up. This is kind of what I'm thinking. And it helps that they bring that stuff to the table. That, and one other thing I was saying too is I think collaborating with technologists, even if you're not personally a technologist, I get it. I think the reason a lot of people are in journalism is they don't like math. And so to tell them like, hey, you should go take some math. You know, that's probably not a popular notion. But even if you're not going to become a programmer or a mathematician or a statistician, just understanding those concepts, and then working with people who do work with them. I'll say that I think one of my abilities I have to Tribune that helps my job security is that I can talk to the computer geeks and I can talk to the journalists and translate. And it's not that they need to translate, they certainly can talk to them. But there are times where it gets really geeky over here, and the editor is looking at me like, is it going to happen or not? What does this mean? And the flip side is a lot of times the programmers will come up with a solution. And before we want to take it to the newsroom on the first line of defense, you go, okay, I understand why you built it that way, but as a journalist, I'm not going to like it, or as a in tune with our mission, it's not going to work. So building those skills really helps. Any type of team work or project-based work, I think is really important. A lot of things we look at is, it's kind of like, this is more on the news app side, the building side, what you build. The ideas on the core are really important, but the execution is probably as important. And that's just to have something you can point to and say, I did that. It doesn't have to be the shiniest, most beautiful thing in the world. It doesn't have to be something that everyone heard of and viral. It's not going to happen. But just to show that, hey, I built this thing. Here's what I learned. We did it with a team. And here's what I would do different. Those kind of questions are always, we find, really illuminating, very helpful. The fact that it shows that, hey, okay, they're going to get along because we're going to have to work together. It's not like you're off the basement where you're going to email or work with us. First, we know what the class. Design knowledge is helpful too. Again, I think as reporters, they don't get a lot of direct design, but they certainly often will sit with the artist or the designer or the programmer and try to explain to them what they're trying to do. So if they have that vocabulary, work, the basic ways around a Photoshop file or things like that. It's helpful. It's kind of like trying to travel a lot, and you might not really be fluent in German, French, Spanish, but if you could order a little bit in the menu and ask where the bathroom is and stuff, it helps quite a bit versus the dumb Americans. How that helps.
And I didn't know what Howdy was when I first came to Austin for grad school. And just for the record, for those of you who haven't taken represent publishing yet, what Ron said that you need to learn a little bit of HTML and CSS, and as an undergrad, we have FDOM that you can take, fundamentals of digital and online community. In that class, we covered concepts of online digital media as well as a little bit of HTML. And in web design and publishing will give you a really, really good foundation of HTML, CSS, and other kinds of applications that we will teach you. Right? Next.
I have a question via Twitter from Cindy Royal.
Oh,
She wants to know what the biggest challenge in hiring for your team.
So, strictly, are there any programmers here? Or is that over here? I'll start with the programmer side. The programmer side, and I know you're not programmers, but I think it might help with this, it's the challenge we have is people who get the mission. It's a mission-based organization. It's nonpartisan news. We're not Fox, we're not MSNBC. We really try to stay down the middle and out of the break. We get a lot of people who are passionate about politics, but we come in like, I want. You gotta keep that in mind. On the tech side, also the challenge is that we're just competing with companies that can pay more. It's a lot more lucrative. It's public media. That doesn't mean it's horrible wages at all, but it's not startup wages, some VC funding. More on the journalism side, it's a very young newsroom. I know our average age is pretty young, so we certainly have some people who have put in years at traditional newspapers and then converted over. But a lot of people have come up either their first job out of school or their second job out of school. So it's a young newsroom on that side. I'm a little hesitant to speak about what Emily or you could ask Evan about looking for more on the reporter side. They certainly look at the traditional things of your clips and your writing ability and your focus on that. When we're looking at people that are more of a hybrid role, like news apps or some visualization work, we look at how they write, communication side, but also they have some coding background, they have some projects they can show. Again, it goes back to the project. It might not be the biggest, snowball project that won the Pulitzer, but the fact that they have projects that can show, hey, I built this is how it works. So finding people that do that. We do find a lot of people. We just hired 2 news app people, for example, and they're great. But we found a lot of people that applied either were strictly graphic designers who were interested in news and had little to no coding experience, or they were all coders who had no storytelling experience. So it's a funky hybrid to find people that do both.
Yes.
Frank Super, I'm an undergrad. I was overviewing your Kickstarter campaign that y'all did last year, and it said that y'all had a 9% success rate in Facebook, or you only got like 9% of your money from Facebook.
Right.
Would you consider Facebook to be dead, or do we even need to use it anymore? What's your opinion on it?
No, I don't think it's dead. It's a pain. I'll say that. So on the Kickstarter in particular, we didn't raise a lot of money through Facebook. Kickstarter was exhausting, and we hit our goal, we exceeded our goal, but it was, I don't know if we'll do it again. It's for a while. Not to disparage it all, it's great, but it's just, again, it's like an animal needs to be fed, so we just want to be fed every hour for 21 days. And for whatever reason, I don't remember the stats, at 9%. Most of our donations came in through email solicitations or Twitter did pretty well. But the bigger question on Facebook, no, I don't think it's dead. In fact, we just had a board meeting yesterday. We reviewed 2014 traffic, where a lot of it's coming from. And Facebook still is the lion's share of our social traffic. video down, everyone's just like, Twitter nut. And it's that dopamine thing, I think it's just like, more. Today when Perry was doing his announcement, like, people had Perry on one screen and Twitter on the other screen, and seeing all the time. But our traffic is driven more by Facebook. Facebook recently, as you probably know, is becoming, at least for pages, company pages, a pay-to-play platform. And so it's a challenge for us. We've seen our shares from Twitter go down quite a bit over the last 18 months. And so we've done a lot to invest time into optimize, how we post, when we post, what kind of images, what kind of stories, a lot more at night on weekends, and then just any, boat post or photo page. And we haven't cracked it up. You look at like Mother Jones does a really good job with Facebook. I think part of it is they pay, but they also have very polemical and incendiary posts to get people clicking about that out. And that is also forwarding and sharing it. And I think it's a challenge we have, honestly, as a Tribune, is that we'll be a little cheeky, a little snarky sometimes, but we can't come out and say, like Mother Jones would do, like, this presidential candidate is a dumb ass. Watch this video. We never do that. Republican or Democrat. Mother Jones being left-leaning and pretty open in its opinions. They'll do stuff almost like that. So Sarah Palin does it again. Woo! Not gonna believe this one. Again, it's above us for that. So it's a challenge with social media in particular, because I think a lot of the reason we click and share on social media is like, this cat is so cute, this video is so crazy, this pissed me off so much. So it's a challenge for us to try to stay above that. Short version, no. We may wish it was.
My name is David with TX State Senior. Going back to Frank, what were some of the strategies and reasons for encouraging Frank, and what were some of the conflicts in the bottom?
Increasing our what?
Player retention rate.
Player retention rate. Good question. So, Frank, as I mentioned, was a daily quiz, and it was scheduled in a way that you only got one quiz a day. So each day you got a fresh quiz of 20 questions. So our notion back then was to not make it an all-you-can-eat menu, just gorge yourself, eat till you throw up, but make this thing where everyone's playing the same game every day, so it becomes precious and waiting for it. It was very social, so people could see, you could get the high score for Texas State or San Marcos, see how I compare against people in this city versus this state, things like that. So that helped a lot. So for retention rate, I think the things that really helped were we had a lot of badges, we had a lot of rewards, a lot of dopamine, just where it was hard. We tried to make it hard to go more than playing 2 or 3 days without getting some kind of incentive. Like, hey, you played 3 days in a row. Here's a thumbs up. Having the fresh content was a big part of that. The trade-off was that I remember many nights, I wrote a lot of questions. The fresh questions came out at midnight. I remember many nights being out with friends or doing things about 9 o'clock. I gotta go home and write questions. It was a tough thing. But that's always, particularly in startup companies and mobile apps, that's the big one, is that retention number. The social side, that's a hard one to track, is, I think, key to that. And we had a taste of success with it, and people played against each other, and a lot of rivalry started, where people would say, oh, I play my teacher, my aunt, my friends, and that guy thinks he's so smart, and I'm gonna show him up. That was our little take on that problem. But now that was 3 years ago, so now it's interesting because I think social apps have kind of, in some ways, taken over what games were, and that they have competitive and competitive. The sharing side, the social side. And apparently, the mobile games are actually declining some, whereas social apps, Snapchat, and things are steadily declining.
I was going to ask about the biggest challenges as far as live streaming goes, and the feasibility of maybe like a service that does live streaming events based on crowdsourcing. So like you could start a campaign for a concert or something that you want to live stream. If you live out in the country or something in Austin, right, enough people back on that, and maybe this service does that streaming that event.
So the hardships or the challenges is remarkably easy to live stream. A woman from Washington Post and I did a panel at this journalism conference in September, and to demonstrate stuff we do now, like stuff we did this morning with Terry, I think I mentioned, it was a $500 little red box called a live stream broadcaster. It takes a SIM card, USB SIM card, which is about 40 or 50 bucks a month, and then a camera. Any camera that takes a connection, UTSD or a nice connection, which are like $70, $800 cameras. So the barrier to entry is really low. And those, if you have good cell signal working like an Ethernet, you can get a HD signal, you're really nice. We've got some nicer equipment that's $3,000 range, that's a little more robust and things like that, but it's not that.
As far as the camera equipment being nice, or the actual streaming?
The streaming device. So we use a thing called the Teradek onto a multi-SIM card device. So it's the same notion, but it has 6 SIM cards instead of 1. So if you're in a congested area like a concert or a political convention or a sports game, and everyone's texting, it splits up your signal across all different carriers. But again, in 3,000 is cheap, but it's, compared to like, not that long ago, it was all TV satellite phones. So compared to $500,000 for a truck, 3,000.
And then in the next few years, it'll be more expensive.
Yeah. And we see a lot of people live stream pretty low-fi ways. Washington Post is interesting. They told us they actually cut back on the live stream. They do a ton of video, but they just felt that is the live stream, is it all live? Or like maybe like Perry's press conference today is live working. Like the indictment was just wasn't overturned yesterday, so this is his first response. But we find this internally too, where people get excited. Oh, let's go live stream this. Now, is it worth it? Like, is it the same thing if we just tape it and show it online later? You're really seeing the edge of the chair. We use the metaphor, remember Seinfeld, when Elaine had the finite amount of sponges, and because it's sponge work. So, often like, let's live stream this like that. I think that's sponge work. Because even though the barrier to entry is low, still like someone has to go out there on the spot. Production-wise, it becomes a lot of extra tension because we promoted ahead of time, hey, we're going to be live streaming at 11. And so if there's a technical difficulty or something happens, suddenly we're scrambling, we look stupid. Whereas someone can go out there and tape it on, trusted tape, come back, upload it, and then say, hey, it looks great, everyone can take a look. Crowdfunding, people are doing stuff like that. We've talked about that around our festival. We do 60 or 70 live events here when it's a big festival in the fall. And we were trying to get our heads around a way to live stream or crowdfund some of that. And hey, maybe there's a bonus event or track that only opens up if we crowdfund it. I think it might be things out there that sounds familiar that are live streaming or crowdfunding live streaming. Interesting idea.
Yes.
Given the fact that you opened 2 companies, what typical advice would you give to somebody looking at opening a company, who would not work as you have with the what's your takeaway from that, and if you were this piece of information on that?
Right. Have something to show someone can touch. That might just be a crude prototype on the phone, but I remember when we were Ricochet at the Crank, Michael and my partner were chasing this angel customer. We had a number of meetings with him, and it wasn't until he was interested, but not that interested. It wasn't until we had a crude prototype on the phone that something he really leaned forward and got it. It was very basic, but he did see it. I think I can't emphasize that enough. Just like making it real. Again, it might be a prototype, but anything on a phone or a tablet or suddenly you're setting yourself apart from 9/10 of the people who are just going to wave their hands or say, we're going to do this, it's going to be great. That's a big one. Trying to have a first customer or even just a customer who says they're interested. Tribune actually was very helpful with that. So we built, Crank had this, part of the kernel was a platform, which means it was kind of an administrative interface behind the scenes. So we used Crank as a way to be able to play it, but then we started trying to make money off of it, saying, hey, you guys are Tribune ABC, there's a this nice interface, you can make your own quiz. Why don't you pay us to do this? You don't have to go build your own quiz, you just pay us a little bit every month. That was kind of our shorter business model. And Evan and the Tribune was our first customer, and that was before we even had anything. We had a quiz game show, we didn't have a platform. And I remember he signed a letter, I got a signed letter saying, I am interested in this. The Tribune would pay some small amount to use it. And I took that letter around to like, investors and media, and like, hey, we're a platform, we've already got a customer lined up. We have 2 or 3 more of them. So it's not, Evan didn't write a check, he didn't do anything other than like say, yeah, you can tell people I will be a customer. That got us a lot of meetings with VCs and angel investors and stuff like that. So that was good. And it took us a while to get to that point, which earlier we had said, hey, let's find 1 or 2 customers that kind of stand behind us and do that. Trying to iterate really quickly. I think a mistake we made with Frank is that we built this quiz game and it got a nice jump out of the gate. And we certainly kept fixing and adding to it. In hindsight, I think we should have spun it a lot faster and done Frank sports or Frank upside down, or picture matching Frank. Something that was totally different that leveraged our technology but showed that we were iterating and spinning off variations. We did get to the point with VCs in particular where they said, okay, Frank's really cool, but what's next? Or, you've been doing Frank for a year now, but the one kick home. And we had big ideas for ways it could split off and vary, but until you actually do it, again, it's hard to it's really cool. Yeah, for sure. It's easier said than done. We talk about you read tech stuff like lean startup approach is all about failing fast, the big tenet of that, which is easier to say you adhere to than actually adhere to. We say we like to fail fast, and we do, but it's tough. Particularly in journalism. Again, this goes back to some of that brought up, I think, from technology company and journalism. Tech company is not so adverse to like having a problem. It's like, oh crap, all right, we'll release a fix on that, or we'll fix a bug on that. That didn't work. We're going to stop that. Facebook's done that a bunch. A lot of their products that didn't work. Like, sorry, move on. And we talk about that in the Tribune, but it's hard, with journalism because it's also your reputation is at stake and your credibility. And not that you would do anything that would jeopardize that, but even if your product doesn't work, your live stream craps out, it's not that you were a bad journalist or you made bad editorial decisions, but it kind of looks bad if somebody says, hey, we'll have the governor at noon, and it doesn't work. Maybe it's, that's tough. With nimble startup culture. Resource allocation is tough, but it is necessary. So I guess I'm answering your question. You definitely have to have that. You have to have a willingness to experiment, a willingness to invest time, and pull the plug though, and say, hey, actually, this is not done. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but you got to report. This is not going to happen. That's a big one. And then another one that we struggle with a little bit is the way to test stuff. It's not on the main stage. So we might do stuff, and we might have it like a soft launch, or just talk about it on social media, not put it on the main site. But I think that helps with innovating and trying things too. We can kind of get some feedback and test it before, we're trying to train ourselves to get away from the big reveal, we call it. Evan, our boss, has a little bit of P.T. Barnum in him. So he likes like, ta-da, check it out now, which is fun, but it's really, in a lot of ways, anathema to technology development. And increasingly, it's not just treating a lot of places you're going to sort of box is doing this a lot. Is to say, hey, ta-da, do you happen to notice that? And incrementally building on it and iterating on it, which is just tough. I think part of media is this, it's better. It's like, let's not even have doors in the car. Let's just see the car coming down the street. Then we'll go to the doors, and then we'll have the GPS. And that's a tough notion, I think, particularly for journalists to kind of get their head around. Where is it? Box did an interesting thing when they launched Box.com. They didn't have search. And some people in our newsroom were like, how they have search? This is embarrassing. And they blogged about it. Box did, which was great. They said, you made those, we don't have search. And that's intentional. It's that search is hard. We have some different ideas on how we want to try it, but we thought that it wasn't the primary goal of the launch and all this stuff. And it's become, search has become the staple of science. And suddenly it's gone. It's like, oh, came today to play cats. It's weird. Actually, it's okay not to work. But that's, that thing that's opened our eyes and others too. Like, okay, you don't have to have all the bells and whistles in place first. And I assume that, things have gone differently in the box and not done search or done push it different ways. They eventually have it. It took a couple of months to do that. So I think, at least in our newsroom, the journalists are evolving more to accepting. It's not that you're accepting a shabby product. You're just accepting the minimal viable thing that really you need to tell the story, to get everything out there. We're trying to train ourselves. We had to think about this today about reviewing a product we just launched. And in hindsight, we really tried to just cram a lot of stuff in. And in hindsight, we should have just focused on our core, not forgotten all that crap we want to tack on, but plug that away. It's easier said than done. Everyone's got to do something else.
Who else?
Writing, and then when I got into video games, it was more writing, design, product management. So that's a big part of what I do is still product management. And that's where, my plain metaphor of traveling and knowing a little bit of languages comes into play. So the coding side, I just taught myself stuff using lynda.com, Khan Academy, and picked up stuff on the job. And it's very rare that I'll do coding. I'll go in and tweak things. I try to defer to Amanda and Chris and our experts on that side. In hindsight, looking at today, one of my personal goals is to get more fluent so that I don't hit my head against the wall or butt up against the wall. It's like I see something on our site, and little things I can say, oh, I know where that is, I can fix that. There's many times that something happens and I go, oh, I don't like this, and I have to go find Chris or Amanda. I think it's fine in my world now that, I was 10 years ago or just starting out, I would certainly, want to focus on those muscles a little more. I feel in some ways fortunate that I didn't have to cut my teeth on that. I kind of came into it sideways with project management and through entrepreneurship. If I was coming straight through the front door, I think I'd probably be at a disadvantage.
Linda does have an app, by the way. I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Linda's pretty amazing. We use it all the time. I found this one recently. It was St. Vincent's keyboard player. Yeah, he did his whole class on how he does all the synth stuff and MIDI stuff and all these samples. And he went to all her songs. And I don't know, like a thing.
Questions?
Oh, the stuff that it's all through the tribune. Yeah. It's I've actually thought about my kids concerts in school. Maybe get the equipment at work, screen this or no. Yeah. Let's see where to start. I think online resources are, it doesn't replace face-to-face, but I'm always amazed at how much is out there. So Linda, Ron, Harvard has all this stuff online now. There's the CS program, which is in there. We've had people go through this work boot camp, but Makerspace, Maker Square. One of our recent hires was from there. I don't know if it was Maker Square or her, but either way, she's awesome. It was nice too because she got a full stack of knowledge. Maker Square, if you're not familiar, it's kind of a boot camp, and it's a little more for people who are transitioning careers. My understanding. This woman Catherine was in marketing and was interested in programming, dabbled in it, but she did this program so she could really transition her career. That went really well. There are a ton of meetups, and that's one more on the social side. Austin and this greater Austin area has so much stuff. We're into Python, we're into JavaScript, there's geeks for every variety out there for sure. Those help. As far as getting an app launched, there's some ways that people are going into it through Titanium and other things with apps, environments that you can build in. When we built Crank, we were using C++, and, it was a little more like old school game design, game development. I talked to Michael recently, my business partner, the main tech guy, and he's kind of shaking his head like, there's so much better ways to do it now. We're building an Xbox game. I think there is some magic, this kind of dodging question, in getting an app in there, even if it's an app no one ever sees, like it's out in the App Store or the Google Play. Or Robert quickly has this class now where he's slamming programmers together with journalists, and they have to get something in the App Store a semester. I've judged that class a couple of times in the final presentation. And some of the apps are crappy, some are pretty awesome. But even the crappy ones, they really came together in a semester and built something and got it out there. That's paper.
Now, I was wondering what exactly on this career for you?
It's more than that. Think about what we do. So we have 4 programmers, and I'll highlight what they're doing this week. Amanda, I know, is working on, we're incorporating Eventbrite into our events stuff. So Eventbrite, you might have used this RSVP system. So we do all these events. We want to start using Eventbrite so people can RSVP for it. And so she's been integrating that with our sites so people can RSVP on the mobile phone or Eventbrite. Eventbrite has its own network, so hopefully the people you're looking for something to do on Eventbrite will see us. She's been doing that. Catherine has been working on some new Twitter widgets for building. We built some new Twitter widgets around the 2016 presidential race. She reviewed how we use Twitter on our homepage. Amanda and Catherine do more fun and stuff like that. Chris and Daniel, our other 2 people, have been doing more back-end stuff. So we're doing a big security hardening for our site now. We're a little scared about what we saw happen with Sony, AD, and other people, so we're trying to tighten down our stuff. We don't think that we're quite in the crosshairs of North Korea, but there's people out there who I'm sure take some glee and causing havoc and contributing. So Daniel's been focused on that a lot, security hardening, improving our data backing. Chris does a little bit of everything. So the short version is they get a lot of special projects. They'll say, hey, we want to build this page about this event coming up, or this live stream, or things like that. They're primarily people in charge of our CMS, so it's a system we use to write the stories. So if anything breaks in the CMS, they build that, they fix it. There's new things going on in our CMS, they'll add that stuff. So for example, now we're adding a new building where we can embed a video into the story. So they've been working on that, code, and do that stuff. So they're, in some ways, code monkeys, but they're also So all the front end stuff is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Our CMS is Python-based system, so Django, Django. They'll get into other stuff occasionally. Part of it's own predilection. We had a programmer who built something in Ruby on Rails, which is unusual for us. But really, the front end stuff is HTML, CSS, and the backside is Django. Each different groups are different, but that's how our work is.
Hi, I'm Courtney from undergrad here. I kind of wanted to ask some questions from a marketing perspective. What do you think are some challenges, maybe the company faces as they're moving forward in terms of dealing with leadership, and maybe some successes that will have?
Question. So we did our first audience research in the fall ever. Like I said, as mentioned earlier in this conversation, Evan and others that were there at the start just said, so we did our first audience research. It was really limited, quantitative, qualitative research, and found out a lot of interesting stuff. Some that shocked us, some that didn't. Some of the shocking things were that people just thought we were an old newspaper. I think part of it was the Texas Tribune sounds like an old newspaper. We'd had a lot of people in the study groups who would go, "Oh, Texas Tribune, yeah, I read that all the time. I get that paper and and the problem, the person was like, "Really?" Like, "Oh yeah, I've read that before." Or they just didn't know who we were at all. So that was sobering as being a statewide organization. Not that we fancy ourselves as like the New York Times, everyone knows us, but big group of people are into politics and policy. Our name recognition was pretty low outside of Boston. The good things that we found are that the people who are in this field, they work in politics, they work in public policy, they work in a state agency, they're really, for lack of better word, on the geeks, the transportation geeks, immigration geeks, hiring geeks. They do us really well. But that's a core, that's like the center of the center of the job. And so the challenge we're facing now, we're trying to figure out is, okay, we got that core group, like those are our heroin addicts. Like we have the drug, they're going to come here no matter what. How do we get beyond that to the recreational drug users? For that, we define them as they're college educated, they consume digital news, they are interested in one or more of our topics. We have about 10 Ds, immigration, healthcare, and stuff. And we've estimated there's about 4 million of those people in Texas. And right now, we're only getting around 400,000 of them. So that's our big challenge in the next 3 years is we're trying to branch out. And so the way we're doing that is it's multifaceted. But one is our content play. We're trying to think more beyond just, hey, what is the real hardcore inside baseball side of this? Like, what's a broader issue that people who don't follow this stuff day in, day out might be interested in? So the Shell Life stuff is a good example of that. We did a big investigative series called Hurting for Work last fall about people who got hurt on the job. And take a real personal look at life people who were working in construction and they got paralyzed and no insurance and no money, they're SOL. So some of it's a content play, some of it's technology play. How does it make the site more friendly? We get a lot of search traffic. Part of it is that we have all these interesting databases that do well in search. For example, we have a database that has every public employee's salary. So that gets a lot of interest if people want to know what their congressman makes, or the dog catcher makes, or their teacher makes. But we don't do a good job of you just glance through and look at that and saying, hey, who are you? Why don't you come check out some other stuff? So now we're trying to work on how we present the site so that if you're just a first-time visitor coming in from one of those side doors, we can say, hey, why don't you check out this other thing that might be cool? We feel like if you check out 2 or 3 things, then more likely you're going to bookmark it or come back. We're doing a lot more outreach with email. Email is old, but it's a workhorse that delivers time and time again. So we're getting a lot more email newsletters that are very focused. So we have one starting next week on healthcare. We have one on energy. We have a daily blast, which is just an update thing. That helps a lot. But we do a lot of events around the state as well. That helps. But it's a big challenge because we don't ever advertise. We've been advertising trails. So we haven't gone out and paid, like, hey, let's get on the side of the bus in Dallas. Let's get TV ads in San Antonio. It's been more word of mouth and occasional trades. But it makes it hard, particularly like some of this research group stuff came up about people saying, oh yeah, okay, I'm really interested in healthcare and integration, but I get all my news from local television. So we were trying some partnerships where we have a lot of video production. We'll try to get on local TV for local that way. But it's just hard, it's still TV. Everyone disparages TV, but you look at all these surveys, TV is still, it's funny, I go to tech conferences and everyone's talking about TV's dead, it's not TV. It's not. Most people, TV is what they do their stuff.
As someone involved, as someone responsible for the logistics and the back end side of the live streaming, how terrifying was it to see those on
It was thrilling and horrible. So the short version, but we had about 12 hours notice that Davis was going to do the filibuster, and we thought too, no, it's really cool, like it's kind of big. And up to that point, the average viewership was about 500 people or so, and I think it peaked that night at around 250,000. And then we were sitting on watching it and getting up to like 5,000. Wow, 5,000. Good. And 10,000. And then, it was probably about 30,000 or 40,000 Obama tweeted. And that's spiked. And then Rachel Maddow started tweeting it. And it really panicked. So it was very terrible. Yeah. And it wasn't just like our tech was we were worried about, but we were using YouTube, so we thought, okay, YouTube can scale, which we had all this encoding stuff going into it that was brittle and it failed before, so we were worried about that. And that was just, the hardware was brittle. Like, it was this little box called Black Magic box, which is Black Magic. It's mysterious or something like that. Often would fail, we have to reboot remotely. And we also had a horrible internet connection at Capitol Time Warner that failed multiple times. And so that was my biggest fear, like Time Warner internet's going to die. I'm going to get fired if the Time Warner's fault. But it worked. It's fine. So they opened up doors for us and more live streaming. Davis never said this, but had that stream not been going, she would not, her star would not have risen right as abruptly as it did. So many people would watch that around the world. I had a funny story. We worked with Twitter, DC and politics government. They came down for the fifth festival, and they mentioned that when the Wendy Davis thing happened, they do this thing where they go out and train politicians how to use Twitter, which sounds like a horrible job. Some don't even know how to turn the phone on. No, seriously, sir. 140 characters. But they were doing this training with the Australian Parliament, and they were in session with like 20 members of Parliament from Australia. And during a break, one of them pulled up his laptop, or her laptop, Davis, had seen a tweet about it. And they're like, what's this? Like, I don't know. This whole group started watching it. They stopped the training for a couple hours and just had the climax of the Davis stuff. Fascinating for them that senator in Texas, they can understand, and MPs in Australia.
We have time about for one or two.
Yes, I just want to see you come over to live streaming your games. I just want to know your opinion on it.
I look at it that I haven't used it too much. I don't know. What do you use it?
I don't stream, but I just
Just because it's music, or do you get
Yeah.
checks?
not that.
So being out of the video game industry in some ways is fantastic. No one asked this, but Garrett, video game business sounds funny when someone who now works in journalism, which is typically seen as the most stable career. The video game business is very driven, very cyclical. So it's always feast or famine. Tribune, it's not a lone wolf, but it's in a smaller group that's stable and growing in the journalism world. people, I'm sure you will, traditional newsrooms. It's not, food isn't always so sunny. The Tribune has a very sunny outlook, and that's very encouraging. It's not like, hey, we're going to take over the world. You know, like, future is bright. Go. This is good. And in video games, it's such a hard slog because you push so hard to get a game out the door. And even games that succeed doesn't mean that it's going to continue on the next one. Many companies, even up the road, Austin, much less around the country, had success with the game, and they just couldn't get the funding for the next one, or for whatever reason. So it's very tumultuous up and down.
Any more questions?
What's it like? You mentioned taking another around to seeds and stuff. What's it like to actually have to go in and ask people
I mean, it's tough. It's exhausting working about it. And we found that jumping is unusual. It becomes a full-time job, chasing money. And again, we had very minor success. We didn't like plan to do a DC contract. But even at our level, we're a small company. There were months there when I was on the road a lot, in California, around Austin, or East Coast, doing show your deck. So we have this dog and pony show. You got a deck, you show, you give your pitch, they try to trip you up, and ask smart questions. Is there money? They show. So it's tough, but it's totally doable. And I think it's phenomenal that guys like you, interesting idea, kind of prototype, go out, perhaps get money to make it happen. It's a great thing. I think it's great. It's just, I would think about if you're going to do that, like you have a partner or two, like, the more serious you get about it, that things like one of you is going to be money chaser. You can kind of go into it knowing that. It's not a thing like, oh, I'm going to spend a week doing that. I'm going to spend 51 weeks building a cool thing. It doesn't usually work that way. The one of you is constantly dialing dollars and make that happen.
I'm going to ask you one last question.
Okay.
So this is my fifth year here at the state, and I do come to our school several times during the past 5 years. Maybe I remember wrong, so if I did, correct me. So when we see History Tribune, like, I think everybody pretty much would think, oh, that's a news organization. And I think a couple of years ago when you were here, during the Mass Company event, you said you see Texas Tribune as a tech company that just happened to build content. So, do you mind elaborating on that at all?
I remember saying that. You should ask Evan the same question. He probably said it. So, where to start with that? I stand by that. I think that's true. I mean, we're building, every day building a product that happens to be journalism. And, it's not that we can take another product and put on top of that. Oh, now it's recipes, and now it's something else. And they're really web. They're in several. The reason I think it's a tech company first is that aside from being digital, being distributed through electronic means, I think at its heart it has all those tenets that become associated with technology, which is things we've been talking about: being nimble, failing fast, experimental, not afraid to put something out there and see if it sticks. That kind of stuff. It's very opportunistic. It's very we're very reluctant or unlikely to hold grudges and like, hey, that guy is last idea sucks, so listen to this. So I think it's pretty much comes from watching it in the tech world. A lot of our journalism too doesn't take the form of traditional journalism. So I think most people you have like journalism stuff that a traditional journalist have little or nothing to do with. It's a graphic designer, it's someone building tables, and someone wrangling a data person. It certainly has journalist instincts and know-how, but they're not, they weren't trained in writing copy. So I think part of that makes it. The third part is, there's the journalism, there's the data, there's the events. We don't really talk about that much. Live streaming plays into that because all of our events are live streamed. But we do 60 to 70 events a year. And these are events that we produce out and about, 75% in Austin, the other around the state. And what those do, a few things. One, for us, it is journalism. So we did the one in Dan Patrick yesterday. And that was his first big public thing since he was inaugurated as lieutenant governor. And Evan asked him all these questions. Town hall set up kind of like this, but a bigger room. We had about 400 people in there for Patrick. It's usually Evan or one of our other reporters doing Q&A. Evan's not as nice to them as he was to me. It's a hot seat kind of thing. To us, that's journalism because it's an event. Often news comes out of that. We did a thing with Anita Perry last year, and she came out saying that she kind of is in favor of women's right to choose, somewhat, which is a pretty big deal for the wife of Ray Perry to say that. So we'll get news out of those. We also feel that just the experience is journalism. So there's 400 people in the room. We call it an original platform. It's people looking each other in the eye, shaking hands, wagging their fingers. Hey, Dan Patrick, I don't like you, but doing it in a civil way. And we do that across the state. We have about 10,000 people here who do these events. So that's journalism to us. And that's, again, I think that speaks to being a tech company and being kind of like, okay, we're trying to, ultimately, we're trying to engage people with this content. Because our belief is that if you're a smarter Texan, it's a better Texas. So if you're plugged into this and you might not like Dan Patrick or Whitney Davis or whoever the person is, the decisions they're making affect all of us. They're spending our money, they're making laws that affect you, whether you know it or not. So our goal is to try to get people engaged with that. And ultimately, that's a tech thing. Evan, I'm still in line with Evans. He likes to say that we do something that's happened a lot in Texas over the years. It's finding a technology solution to a human problem. So the human problem is people have been, over time, disengaged and not paying attention to what happens at the Capitol. And so our tech solution is to find ways to use Tribune, social media, live streaming, data applications to engage them with that stuff. They might not be people who are going to open up the newspaper and read it, but they're going to be people who look on their phone. There'll be people who watch a live stream. For us, that's just having a subscription to the state.
I mean, for me, even though I'm one of the digital media faculty members here, even for me, a couple of years ago, when I heard you say that, I thought that was one huge difference between the Texas Tribune and a lot of other news websites, because a lot of other, I believe so, and I think that's the case, they would still think them as news companies, news organizations that they have a website, it's one of their products, but they won't consider themselves as a tech company. I think that's really one very important thing for you as a student, as a person who wants to create something, to keep in mind that when you look at something differently, you will do things differently, and you will create things that can work differently. So that's it for today, our very first week of the semester. So please, everybody.